Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 248 of the Assorted Calibers podcast. The Second Amendment podcast is a little bit for everyone. I'm Weird Beard. And tonight, she's wonderful. She's amazing. She's the greatest hostess a man could ever want. She's also one of the most important voices of the Second Amendment, Aaron Paulette. How you doing, Aaron?
I'm all right, although I do have to wonder how long you're going to bang the most important Second Amendment voices drum. I don't mind. I just is this a permanent thing now?
Right
because
now,
I didn't get the award.
It doesn't matter. Like you were nominated, and guess what? It's true.
Okay. I really don't have anything to report. Interestingly enough. Yeah, I've already spoken about going to the Libertarian Convention last week. I just spent the last week, recovering from trip and unpacking and things like that. I have nothing. How are you doing, Weer'd?
I'm doing okay. Look, I still need to take my suit that we wore to the red carpet to the dry cleaners. It's just been one of those. I just don't have the spoons.
Did you spill food on it?
No, it just got dusty, so I thought it's a good idea.
Oh.
Just take it to the dry cleaners, get it pressed, and then put it back in the garment bag and tuck it in the closet.
Oh,
so
okay.
Therefore it'll be nice and crisp and fresh, like it was when I pulled it out of the closet and brought it to Texas.
Okay. I mean, believe it or not, the dress that I wore is actually machine washable. So mine was cleaned before yours was.
Yes, it was.
Which, now that I think about it, is not that surprising.
No, well, I mean, there's a very reasonable dry cleaner at like the end of my street, so it's not that big a deal. I just need to go do it. But yeah, that's yeah, I don't know, just kind of a blur. Like this weekend was all just lots of little things happening one after another, and I had a good time, but I was very tired, and my daughter. The school nurse called and said my daughter had a sore throat and she wanted to come home early, and I was worried that was going to be a disaster. She was fine, but hopefully she's feeling better come morning, because I don't want to go to the doctor's office, get her swabbed. That's it. I've got nothing interesting to say. Don't act like I'm interesting.
Well, I mean, you're not interesting, but you are sometimes amusing.
I mean, that is true. But I need something to work off. I can't just go after the fact that, I play NetHack and I make fancy cocktails. I'm drinking a paper plane right now. These are really good.
I like flannel and revolvers.
I do like flannel and revolvers, though not the ones Oddball was showing. Oddball was just, for those listening to the ACP blooper reel, you will hear that Oddball likes to taunt me with Chiappa rhinos in 40 Smith & Wesson. It's not okay, Oddball. It's not okay.
So how do you feel about the Chiappa Rhino?
I actually kind of like it. I kind of dig on it. They are neat guns. I like the fact that they shoot from the 6 o'clock position for recoil mitigation. I think that they overall do it without being. They're not that much more complicated than a lot of people. Oh, they're super complicated. Not that much more. Yeah, I think overall they're kind of cool guns. I mean, they're a little weird in the fact that most of them have what looks like a hammer in the back, but when you pull the trigger, it doesn't go anywhere. All it is a little lever that you can use to cock the hammer, or you can pull it back and then pull the trigger and lower the hammer down to bring it back into double action. Is all it is. But they do make a snub-nosed one.
Yeah, he was showing us that snubby, and it looked deformed.
I have a soft spot for it. They specifically make one that has the concealed hammer, quote unquote, even though they're all concealed hammer. I don't know. I have an innate attraction to that specific one. I just think it looks very utilitarian and neat.
Okay. Would you rather have a Chiappa Rhino or a Mataba auto revolver?
Ooh. I'd probably go with the Rhino only because the Rhinos aren't worth a whole heck of a lot, and I just don't think I'd love the auto revolver as much as I should for something that's as relatively rare and cherished.
Okay.
So yeah, they're designed by the same person, by the way.
I wasn't certain. I thought so.
Mm-hmm. Yep, same dude, different company.
But which dude, Weer'd?
I'd have to go to the, I don't know, some dude from Italy. Let's see.
Emilio Gazzoni.
Yeah, you beat me to it.
I type faster than you do.
I believe he passed away in 2008. I remember he died not too long after the Rhino came into production.
All right, so enough screwing around, I think. Let's get to the main topic.
Yes. So the first one that I've got put in here, I really kind of wanted to take a slightly different take than what a lot of people are going on, but this is, you probably,
I mean, that's good because I couldn't get through the article. I started to read it and it's like, nope.
Yeah, nope. What is going on with everybody else is talking about is that Time did an interview with Gabby Giffords, and at the very, very end of the article, essentially, she says, let me see if I can find, yes, the quote is, as we wrap up our interview in her office, I ask how she keeps coming back to the challenge so deeply ingrained in politics. She pauses for 12 pregnant seconds. No more guns, she says. Ambler, her aide and advisor, tries to clarify that she means no more gun violence, but Giffords is clear about what she is saying. No, 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 she says. Lord knows. She pauses for another 32 seconds. Guns, 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 no more guns, gone. And then the aide clarifies she's talking about Australia, where the gun sales were outlawed after a mass shooting and the existing weapons were purchased by the government. Giffords nods the affirmative. It's an idealistic goal for sure, and perhaps mismatched for the moment, blah, 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 blah. But either way, the big talk is that Gabby Giffords says in this interview that essentially she wants to get rid of all the guns. And a lot of people are talking like Gabby Giffords wasn't shot in the head, and I would argue is quite cognitively impaired. But as a further perspective, as the person who's constantly watching every video put out by the Giffords anti-gun group for it, one thing I noticed that for, I believe, a month leading up to the Democratic National Convention where Joe Biden was nominated for the candidate for president, a month before that, Gabby Giffords was giving the exact speech that she gave at the convention, which of course was all done virtually. She gave that exact same speech at every single Giffords event. And then for another, I think 2 months afterwards, she continued to give the exact same speech, in some instances actually talking to an applauding audience that wasn't there. Essentially, she learned a trick and she was doing the trick over and over and over again. She is very clearly good at being taught something and repeating it. And so while I don't really want to quote Gabby Giffords as any sort of major statement, she was pro-gun before her injury, and it was her husband who was always the anti-gun person. And this is, of course, as I've said many a time, very similar to Jim Brady, who was, I believe, I never heard one thing or another about Jim Brady's stance on firearms, but I would assume that he was not as anti-gun as his wife Sarah, and then he gets shot in the head and suddenly he gets led around and people keep saying how much he's changed his mind on guns, but he never actually really spoke for himself. And then the same thing has been happening with Gabby Giffords. She was a moderate Democrat and fairly pro Second Amendment as a representative from Arizona, and then she was severely injured. She was damaged in the frontal lobe, which is extremely important to cognition. And then next thing you know, her super anti-gun husband, who is now a senator, is essentially talking all this big talk of gun control, and she's giving these simple one-word responses, essentially agreeing with him. And so my take on this, which I haven't really heard other people saying, is that I don't necessarily think Gabby Giffords thinks one way or the other about gun control, but I think she's repeating things that she's heard. And one thing that I think Gabby Giffords does a lot of is meet and greets with various donors for anti-gun groups. And so she will frequently hear her handlers or her husband, Mark Kelly, talking to people who are donating to a gun control group, essentially saying, yeah, we're going to round up all the guns. And this should come as no surprise. Again, the Beto O'Rourke quote that I've played a bunch of times. You know what? I'll cut it right in here.
Are you proposing taking away their guns, and how would this work?
I am. If it's a weapon that was designed to kill people on a battlefield.
So yeah, the Beto gave this big anti-gun statement. We're going to come for all your guns, and everybody in the audience applauded, and everybody on the stage was clapping their hands. You can go find the video on YouTube and see that. Yeah, no, they're totally fine with banning all the guns. I've got quotes of all sorts of politicians talking about how Australia, they did a wonderful thing, except for it really wasn't that effective. But they rounded up all the guns. And this is what they're planning for us. Even California hasn't gone far enough as far as the anti-gun forces go. And that's my take on this, not what Gabby Giffords said. It's the fact that Gabby Giffords is so steeped in this anti-gun rhetoric. And of course, also another bigger statement is that her aide was doing their best to try to spin it in a way that was a little less damning. And despite all of that, Time really just showed it up warts and all, including noting how much time she was pausing in between giving answers, and essentially the fact that the aide was speaking for her, which as a general
that
rule,
was definitely not flattering.
No, it was not. I mean, essentially saying, yeah, no, we're interviewing Gabby Giffords, but no, we're talking to the handler that's essentially directing how Gabby Giffords should answer, which is really sad and abusive. And yeah, it makes me like, every time I saw Gabby give those speeches over and over and over again, it made me sad, just because of this is being done to her. And so yeah, this is bad news, and it's being done by bad people, and those bad people want to take away your guns, not just your scary assault rifles and your high capacity magazines, but they want to take away your pump action shotguns and your bolt action rifles and all of that stuff. So yeah, that's the state of things. Not that it should be a surprise to anyone who's been paying attention.
Yeah, I remember that we had a segment on the show not too long ago where we covered most of this already. Yep. How there's no charitable way to say it, but she's being exploited, and they are basically parading her around like an animal doing a trick.
I mean, there's an actual video. I was digging around for it the other day, and I wasn't able to find it, but there is a speech that she was giving where literally Mark is standing behind her and pointing to each word in the speech, and she's saying it as he's tapping it with his finger. So it's, yeah, she's being worked as a puppet, and it doesn't make me happy seeing that happen. So this is you've got this one here in the show notes, and I actually I heard about it, and then I realized, I forgot about it, and you just reminded me in the show notes. So why don't you read that headline, Aaron?
Yeah. So Nebraska has become, well, depending on how you define it, the 26th or the 27th permitless carry state. And I say that because, as we talked about however many weeks ago, Florida is permitless concealed carry only. Wait, but Nebraska is too. So, yeah, semantically, this is a mess. Because when I hear constitutional carry, I hear open or concealed. When I hear permitless carry, I think the same thing because there's not that much difference. But now it seems like maybe permitless is being redefined as constitutional concealed only. But anyway, so the article says the 26th state, but we all know it's the 27th. Mm-hmm. And so that is one more state. And I believe once we hit 33 states, that'll be 2/3. And so, I mean, not that we gain anything when that happens, but it goes from being a simple majority to a very significant majority.
Well, there's certainly something to be said about how things sit, is that before, NYSERPA v. Bruin, there were still states that had may issue carry laws. And there were places where you could have a clean criminal background and no real reason to deny you a permit, but you could still get denied a permit. But those states were the extremists. They were the radicals. They were the weirdos. And essentially, shall issue permitting was the way to fly. And that was just the way things were done. And, even go back to, we had the, Wisconsin and Illinois both wouldn't issue permits, and that was strange. But also, very, very, it wasn't that long ago when it was just Vermont and Alaska, or just Vermont, Alaska, and Arizona that didn't require a permit to carry a firearm. And those were kind of the outliers. And the fact that it's now not outliers anywhere. Now all the states shall issue. There's, some asterisks behind the extremists who are flying in the face of the courts and essentially just being petulant. But they're the extremists, and their behavior is strange and irresponsible. And so the fact that we don't specifically gain anything by moving it over. I mean, obviously, we gain stuff if you're traveling through these. I didn't look to see if this one cares if you're if you're out of state or not. Some like I know Wyoming is permitless, but only for residents. So if you're traveling through Wyoming, you need to have a permit that state recognizes. But either way, it's beneficial to both the people in that state and for anybody traveling through if they so allow it. But it's also beneficial on the fact that they're going so fast. I mean, it was only a couple weeks ago that Florida was signed, and so I'm losing track of how many states are permitless, which is just amazing. And I think that's going to continue to happen now that it's switching over. And again, we're not seeing the sky falling. We're not seeing shootouts over parking spaces. We're not seeing gangbangers getting away with violent crimes because, normally we'd throw you in jail for carrying a gun without a permit, but you don't need a permit now. So I guess we got to let you go, said nobody ever. So no, this is wonderful, and thank you so much for remembering it, Aaron, because I would have forgotten.
You're welcome. The thing that I find very odd is that even though the governor signed it into law on the 25th of April, it doesn't take effect until September 10th. And I really don't know why it takes 6 months to go into effect. Now, for some regulations, it makes sense because you want to give people a grace period to come into compliance or to set up a new regulatory process or things like that. But for something which is, okay, you now no longer need a permit, why does it take 6 months? The only thing I can think of is that maybe this was a compromise measure in order to get it passed with the hopes by some of the compromisers that they can bring a lawsuit against it in those 6 months. Do you have any insight on this?
I don't. I just know another potential could be that there might just be simple parliamentary rules that it doesn't start until the next session or something like that. I don't know. So yeah, it certainly doesn't make any sense on the, yeah, you're right. If it, we've talked about like, California demanding background checks for ammo sales. Well, they could pass the law, but we can't just do it because we don't have any means to do it. And so it took them a while to get into. I think they actually ended up needing like a dispensation where where for a while you could still buy ammunition without a background check because there was no means to do it. That makes sense. But yeah, this doesn't on just don't stop worrying about it.
Mm-hmm. So because we were talking about Florida, and my mother asked me about this while we were walking the dogs, I hadn't heard about this. There has been a bill passed into the Florida legislature to reduce the minimum age for purchasing a firearm to 18 years old. Now, yes, I know 18-year-olds can buy long guns, but this specifically allows them to buy pistols as well. And I'm surprised it had gotten this far without me knowing about it. It has actually passed in the House, in the Florida House, and has now been sent over to the Senate. And DeSantis has made noises that he will sign it. So this is just something to, keep an eye on. And it caught me by surprise. I'm guessing it caught you by surprise. And so that'll be a really, really neat thing because, well, there are a lot of young queer people who are kicked out of their house because their parents do not approve of their children being queer. And young queer people are at a risk for victimization, and so the ability to own a firearm for self-defense, especially now with the Florida permitless carry, if they can then buy a pistol, then that means they can carry one for self-defense, and that is fantastic. So I will keep folks posted as this develops. Hello, this is future Aaron calling back to the past in order to correct a mistake that I made. So when I was talking about Florida lowering the age to purchase a firearm from 21 to 18, I was under the impression at the time that this was for pistols and not for long guns. I am mistaken, as I figured out after doing some research. So first of all, the age to purchase a firearm is 21, and that's federal. And Florida can't do anything about that, and I'm actually quite upset at myself that I missed that. All I can do is say that it was late and I was tired. As regards to this new law, so what's going on there is that in 2018, back in February, we had the Parkland shooting. And so as a result, that year, the Florida legislature raised the age of purchasing any firearm to 21. And so what this new bill will do will strike that, and then the purchase of a long gun is now reduced to 18 the way it was. And, of course, they can't do anything about a 18-year-old purchasing a handgun because that's federal. On the other hand, an 18-year-old can lawfully possess a handgun if it is purchased either not through an FFL or, I believe, if it is given as a gift. But they must be 18 years old. So it's not the perfect solution for the safety of queer 18 to 20-year-olds that I thought it would be, but it's a step in the right direction. So sorry for getting it wrong, and I hope this clears things up. And now back to your regular program.
Yeah, and it also, to further add the irony, is that there's lots of instances where young adults will have pistols on them, be like members of the military. That's always the big one that gets thrown. You can, sign up at, I think 17 and a half is the minimum age, but you could essentially join the military at 18 and
well, okay, I'm far from an expert I think you can sign up at 17, but you need a parental waiver. I'm not sure about the half, and I don't think it's any younger than that.
Yeah. Either way, I remember hearing something about 17, and you don't know off the top of your head, so we're out of our element. But either way, you can be a member of the armed forces at 18 and carrying around, rifles and pistols and tanks and all sorts of stuff. And so the idea that then suddenly this person comes home and they can't buy a pistol is ridiculous. And then another one that just popped into my head as I realized I've talked about this in the ACP blooper reel, and I've talked about it in other places as well. But I was arrested due to a clerical error, and it was a very humorous story, and the officers were great. But the officer that arrested me, like, there was a joke that I was making I was thanking the officers. I'm like, this night could have gone like really badly if you guys had wanted to be uncharitable to me. But I appreciate, and they really threw out a lot of stops to help me because they knew something was up with this warrant that was out for my arrest. And
yeah, this was the one where you got pulled over for a traffic infraction and found out there was a bench warrant against you.
Not even. The cop that pulled me over was a rookie fresh out of the academy, and he was bored working a late night assignment, and I was driving home from a wedding, and so he was behind me waiting for me to speed, and I saw him, and I was driving 2 miles under the speed limit, and so he knew that I wasn't going to speed, so he got bored and ran my plates, and it came up with a warrant for my arrest, and he pulled me over. But the cop said, "Yeah, man, you should buy this guy a beer." And he went, "Oh, wait, no, you can't buy him a beer. You're not 21 yet." Dude was like 18 or 19. And yet he had a gun on his hip because he was a sworn peace officer. And so, yeah, the idea that we will absolutely allow 18, 19, 20-year-olds to be peace officers and carry firearms to serve and protect the people, but yet not allow them to buy a firearm of their own is absolutely hypocritical and awful.
So, speaking of hypocrisy, and that hypocrisy being struck down.
Yes.
We talked about this some weeks ago where it was the one where you weren't here, and the boys and I were just chortling over this particular judge who was giving the state of Illinois a solid reaming. And, well, the case progressed pretty much as we expected, and the federal court has blocked the Illinois assault weapons ban.
I mean, I would say on one hand, we should be surprised because, I mean, we've known since Heller that banning something like AR-15s is absolutely just in the pale because they are such ubiquitous firearms that this idea that passing an assault weapons ban could somehow pass muster and not be a violation of the Second Amendment is ridiculous. But at the same time, we've had many courts that have upheld assault weapons bans in the past. So it is good to see that the courts are going in the right direction. And I mean, it seems like just about every week we're talking about another court victory that's going on, and things are just heading up the pike. And of course, like I said, we got multiple assault weapons bans that are heading up the way. They're assuming they're going to all be repealed, or not repealed, appealed, and they're going to make their way to the Supreme Court. And I'm hoping that the Supreme Court will just bundle them all together and hear them in just one big block, so that we can all finally be just free of these dumb laws and the idea that politicians can pass them. Because of course, places like Massachusetts and California and Connecticut all have assault weapons bans, and so if Illinois is ruled unconstitutional, then it should reason that these other laws will also be struck down on constitutional grounds, especially if the challenges that are specifically about those are lumped in as well. But also that every time Joe Biden makes a speech, he's talking about, oh, we need to ban assault weapons, and the answer to that is no, we don't, and no, you can't.
On a similar note, because you talked about bundling, And we're going to talk about another topic in a minute, but someone asked Pink Pistols and Blazing Sword on Twitter if we were going to file anything in the New Jersey magazine ban lawsuit. And that's, Association of New Jersey Rifle and Pistol Clubs versus whoever in New Jersey. And what happened with that was that SCOTUS had already ruled on Bruin, and so when it got to them, SCOTUS sent it back to the circuit court and said, reconsider this in the light of Bruin. And so this one is, and I don't remember the names, I can't seem to find it at the moment, but it's being bundled with, I believe it's like, Esselman and Cheeseman. And one of those is against the New Jersey assault weapons ban, and there's another one that New Jersey is trying to pull in New York City and make all sorts of areas, restricted and sensitive. And so all of those now are being bundled together into a single case. And we'll see what happens. And because I've told the people who find the lawyers to write our amicus briefs, I want a piece of this. And I was told, well, it's in the discovery stage right now. We aren't at the amicus brief stage yet, but I'm aware of it, New Jerseyans, and I'm definitely want a piece of it. But relevant to that, and Weer'd actually put the link here. I had forgotten to do it, didn't think it was necessary, whatever. I know, Weer'd, you're going to slap my hand. But Operation Blazing Sword Pink Pistols, along with the rest of the historically discriminated coalition and the Liberal Gun Club, shout out to friend of the show, Lara Smith, we have filed an amicus brief in Ocean State Tactical versus the state of Rhode Island, which is the case that is fighting Rhode Island's magazine ban. And they have the typical gun prohibition law of you can only have a magazine that's 10 rounds or less, because, as we all know, that 11th round makes you a mass murderer. And so we have that filed, and there is a link to it in the show notes that goes to Blazing Sword, and so we've got our summation as to who all is involved, and well, why we oppose it? Well, I mean, obviously. But there's also the fact that this is, one of those things that has popped up post-Bruin, and I want to stomp them all out, because we played a tiny but important role in Bruin, and I don't want anyone to undo that. And so, follow the link, and you can look at the amicus brief, and, I'll keep you posted on this. As for the other lawsuits, such as, Knight Institute versus New York, or our work with Fighting Oregon's Measure 114, currently have nothing. I'll let you know as soon as I know anything, but right now I don't know anything. So, Operation Blazing Sword, still fighting the good fight. We aren't funded by a big New York billionaire, so please send us money. We're a 501c3 and we need your help.
And also, I want to just give a shout out to the people of Rhode Island. I know a bunch of people down there, and they're good people. And I think Rhode Island often gets left in the lurch. Number one, it's so small, but also it's right in between Massachusetts and Connecticut and New York, and those states always get so much news on how anti-gun they are that people may not realize that Rhode Island has got just as many anti-gunners there, and just as many restrictive laws. And so, yeah, we need to wipe all this crap out of all of our states. Nobody should be living under an anti-gun regime, because it's just not allowed. It's illegal. It's against the Constitution.
Yeah, when I posted the link to our amicus brief, or amicus brief, however you say it, I got a message from a roadie friend of mine, and She said, I know you didn't do it for me, but thank you. I appreciate it as much as if you came here and fought beside me. It means the world. Rhode Island is always overlooked. We fight so hard here, and to get support is amazing. So, yeah, this just backs up what you were saying. Rhode Island is tiny, and it gets neglected. And so, no state left behind.
Yep. And again, all of these cases not only have, if they end up making their way to the Supreme Court, not only will they fight for that state, but they'll also fight for all of us. And not only for those of us in magazine banned states like me and my drum magazine that lives in Maine, and I haven't even used it yet, but also for everybody else. Again, there's always the threat of another assault weapons ban, another magazine ban, another restrictive law. And if it gets ruled unconstitutional, that just takes it off the table. They can still threaten it, but it makes it a whole lot harder. All right. So speaking of unconstitutional, I thought you would like this story, especially, even though it's not specifically a Second Amendment story. Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the headline, Supreme Court to hear major case on limiting the power of federal government, a long-term goal of legal conservatives. This is a case that is specifically going to take on Chevron deference.
Oh,
I really like this story because it's actually going against the Natural Resources Defense Council. So So it's a different group, because it sounds like actually it's dealing with fisheries observers on herring boats, which
yes, and I wanted to get your opinion on that, because so this will ultimately challenge Chevron deference, but the reason that the case is being brought before it is that I'm going to check what state it's in.
I don't think it is. I believe it's. I believe it's international waters. So.
Yeah, well, but so apparently the National Marine Fisheries Service, for whom I believe you worked, is now requiring that these fishing boats not only have an observer, but they have to pay the observer's salary.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when these fishing conglomerations, whatever the term is, basically said, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's one thing for you to require that we have a snitch on board. I mean, no offense meant, but that's what it is.
None taken. I am ashamed of some of the work that I did for the government.
Yeah, but now you have to pay for your snitch. It's almost like a corporate version of quartering a soldier.
Yeah. And so for a little inside information, when I was on herring boats in the North Atlantic Fleet, I was going on as I technically did not directly work for the government. I worked for a private company that was contracted by the government. So I didn't have a government pay grade at any point in time. But essentially it was National Marine Fisheries Service, NMFS is what we called it, is the people that issue the federal fishing licenses for fishermen to go and engage in fishing on a particular fishery. So it depends on what type of fish you're going after is what license you have, and that's held by that's issued by the federal government. And a stipulation of that is that if someone like me showed up and I was a, certified fisheries observer, and I said, I'd like to come along with your boat to observe your fishing, they could not refuse me, and they could lose their license if they told me to go pound sand. Though at that point in time, the payment was, I was obviously getting paid by the company I worked for, but they were getting paid directly by the federal government for that, not by the fishing boats. So all the fishing boats were required to do was offer me space and not interfere with my duties. I will also note that herring boats were by far the easiest boats for me to work on, because there's virtually no bycatch. I'm trying to remember if I identified really any bycatch. We caught just herring. So we weren't catching any sort of, dolphins or turtles or any of those sort of things, which are a concern, but we also weren't catching anything that we were either throwing back or were getting killed and not utilized by the fishery. It's a very, very clean fishery. So I don't know what the motivation behind it, but I will say that overall I was very displeased with how, the regulations and the use of the data was done when I was working for them. So, probably nothing good is coming of this, and there's ulterior motives from the government. But again, the idea that it doesn't specify in here. I don't know if NIMS had simply updated the terms of the license that now says that not only do you have to have to take a fisheries observer on board, but it sounds like they're actually mandating them, which I knew some observers from the West Coast, and they have catcher processors. So the boats are catching the fish and actually cleaning them and then freezing them while still at sea. And those boats are gigantic, and they're working 24 hours a day, and there would be 2 observers on the boat. So there would be essentially 24-hour full coverage of every boat in the fleet. Sounds like they're trying to do something similar to that on these herring boats. So
one of the things that really surprised me about this article, because I didn't know this, is that they say that these herring boats normally only have room for 5 or 6 individuals, and I thought the crew was at least twice that large. So yeah, if you're mandating having a government observer along who may not be as nice as you and won't help out, you've got someone who's occupying space but isn't helping with the catch. That's definitely going to hurt the slim profit margin of these boats.
But yeah, and that is accurate. It does not take that many people to run a herring boat. There might be more space. As a general rule, herring are, because of the volume of them that you're catching, tend to be larger boats than some of the very, very tight quarters that I used to work on with some of the smaller boats. But yeah, no, I'm trying to remember if it was a herring boat or not, but there were times where I was sleeping underneath the galley table because there was literally no spare bunks for me.
I feel like there's a joke in there somewhere, but I can't make it work.
Oh, our listeners will send them in, I'm sure.
But speaking of not working,
well, so, yeah. To tie it all together, I wanted to tie it back to, obviously we've got the Chevron deference, which is of course a regulatory agency is also making the rules of which they're regulating. I wanted to tie this into the ATF director, Steve Beeplesneets. I always joke on his name because Joe Biden can't say it either. Steve Bock was called before the House of Representatives to discuss the ATF's ruling on pistol stabilizing braces and calling them short-barreled rifles. And I specifically have a link from Guns and Gadgets, who was the winner of the most important voice of the Second Amendment, and he earned it. It's a great channel. I highly recommend. He's a good guy. We spent a bunch of time with him, but it's Representative Thomas Massie, who's a big supporter of the Second Amendment, calls out Steve Bock saying, did Congress pass a law to, in between when you approved of this gun or this accessory and then you declaring them to be illegal? And he said, no law was passed, but the stabilizing braces had changed. And then he reaches under his desk and pulls out the original pistol stabilizing brace that was submitted to the ATF for approval, the one that started it all, and said, this is the original one. Is this exempted under your ruling? And then he just starts backpedaling and doing anything he can not to answer, because the truth is, it's not. It is not. There is, as a matter of fact, I've heard some people who are much more authorities on the issue. Nobody is aware of any company that currently makes a pistol stabilizing brace that is legal for you to place on your pistol. They are all considered short-barreled rifles under the law. It does not matter which design you have or what modifications you could do to it to make sure that it is only a pistol stabilizing brace. And so the fact that this wasn't changed by an act of Congress, nobody said, we need to make pistol stabilizing braces illegal, or we need to declare them short barrel rifles and amend the NFA. The NFA has not changed. The only thing that's changed is the ATF's mind. And of course, the ATF is the law enforcement agency that will be enforcing this. So if you decide, no, I'm going to keep my stabilizing brace, well, the people that may be throwing you in federal prison will be the people under Steve Diedelbach. And that should ring all sorts of red flags.
Yeah, so I watched that, and I normally don't like this sort of thing, but for 5 minutes, this guy waffled and deflected and would not give a straight answer. And one of the things that Beeplesneets said was when Massie asked him, something like, there are 30 days left before the people become a felon, what can they do? And he did mention, well, they can take it off of their firearm, at which point Massie asked him more or less point blank, oh, so you're not going to arrest them for constructive possession? And I don't remember what his answer was, but I feel like it was more backpedaling because he just realized, oh crap, I'm about to testify in front of Congress under oath that we aren't going to get people on constructive possession, and that's one of the things the ATF loves to do. So yeah, they grilled him, and he didn't do well. He burned to a crisp. And
consistently, I mean, just look anywhere for this. I mean, it was a bloodbath. I liked it was painful because the man at no point answered any questions unless it was from an anti-gun representative. But someone asked him, someone said, you said before you're not an expert in firearms, because he keeps saying, they'll ask him a very specific question. I'm not an expert on firearms. Are you an expert in tobacco? Are you an expert in explosives? Are you an expert in anything? And he's not. He's very, very good at doing Joe Biden's bidding, because that's the reason why he's there. And so, yeah, I did the weird audio fisk on him. Let you guys know that he's a terrible guy, and he's not our friend, and this should cement that. But at least he got to twist in the wind.
I think my favorite part was when Massie did something under his breath, and it was basically, you're freaking useless. I'm going to stop questioning you, and I'm going to reclaim my time because, you are incapable of giving this answer.
Yep. Yeah.
He all but said, you're a freaking idiot and I'm done with you.
Yeah, the reclaiming of the time is just I wasted my time asking you questions because you didn't answer them. And yeah, it was, I am not a huge fan of the whole gotcha questions and all of that. But that was extremely well thought out and brilliant because he had the original arm brace. And so it was one of those, they sent this to you. You looked at it. You said it was okay. You said it was legal. So he started making them, and then he sold the rights to it, and other people started making them. And now they're all out there. And now you're going to say that these people are breaking the law for having this item that you said it was okay. What changed? And the only thing that changed was the political winds. And that should not be allowed.
And that's why we hate Chevron deference, everyone.
Hopefully it will die in a fire.
I've got the marshmallows.
Yay!
Have you heard of a Reflector site? David says that it's older than you may think.
Hi, and welcome to Gun Lovers and Other Strangers. I know it's been a while, but in this segment I'd like to return to my continuing series on the history and use of sights and optics on firearms. This time, I'll be talking about red dots. As I mentioned in a previous segment, Reflex, prism, and holographic sights all fall under the red dot umbrella. However, they all have distinctive features within that set. The ancestor of this category of sights is the reflex sight, originally called a reflector sight. It's been around for considerably longer than most people realize. It's also the parent of the heads-up display first used in fighter aircraft and later in cars and other vehicles. The reflector sight was originally patented in 1900 by Sir Howard Grubb, a noted optical designer and telescope maker in Ireland. He titled his patent, A Gun Sight for Large and Small Ordnance, and described it briefly as a better alternative to the difficult-to-use iron sight while avoiding the telescopic sight's limited field of view, greater apparent target speed, parallax errors, and the danger of keeping the eye against an eye stop. On March 20th, 1901, at a meeting of the Royal Dublin Society, he began the explanation of his new invention as follows. When it is necessary to point any instrument at an object, whether it be a rifle or a gun or a telescope, it is usual to do so by glancing at the object along the axis of the instrument, or some member or part which is parallel to the axis, bringing this part as nearly as possible into the line of sight between the eye and the object aimed at. This is done instinctively without any education or instruction, and it is curious to note that in this, the 20th century, the most primitive and unscientific method still endures, and is used in all but exceptional cases for sighting purposes in our most modern weapons. He continued by describing a theoretical ideal sight we may also recognize. It would be possible to conceive an arrangement by which a fine beam of light, like that from a searchlight, would be projected from a gun in the direction of its axis and so adjusted as to correspond with the line of fire so that wherever the beam of light impinged upon an object the shot would hit. This arrangement would be of course equally impracticable for obvious reasons, but it is instanced to show that a beam of light has the necessary qualifications for our purposes. Now, the sight which forms the subject of this paper attains a similar result not by projecting an actual spot of light or an image on the object, but by projecting what is called in optical language a virtual image upon it. Impossible then, but he quite clearly described a laser sight of the type most Americans became familiar with starting in the mid-1980s. He went on to detail what most shooters of today would instantly recognize as a reflex sight and listed a number of features we expect from the modern iterations of his invention. These points included the aiming mark being sharply defined simultaneously with the object being aimed at, meaning the shooter could keep both the aiming mark and the target in focus simultaneously. Little to no parallax. As long as the aiming mark and the target were both visible, the bullet would impact where they coincided. Ability to be used with or without magnification. Any form of aiming mark, whether cross, circle, or other, could be used, even those impossible in traditional magnified optics of the time. His design was self-contained and easily detachable from the weapon. The sight itself has no adjustments, so it is not possible to be put out of order or adjustment unless actually broken. The field of view is practically unlimited and the view of the horizon is not obstructed. And the aiming mark can be conveniently illuminated and the sight used as effectively at night as in the day. Sir Howard's invention was slow to catch on at first, but soon went on to take the world by storm. It was first adopted into military service on German fighter planes late in World War I. This was followed by use on nearly every other military aircraft of the late 20s and 30s. By the Second World War, the reflector sight was being used not just in aircraft gun sights, but on a wide variety of military equipment, including land, vehicle-mounted, and naval artillery. Its simplicity and quick target acquisition led to the adoption of the name reflex sight that we still use today. In future segments, I'll go into detail on how we got from the original reflector sight to other members of the red dot family.
Eye into the right. Eye into the right. Eye into the right. Hit. Hit. Hit.
That about wraps up this segment. If you have any questions for me or suggestions for future segments or a comment on a past segment, please post them on the Assorted Calibers Podcast Facebook or MeWe pages, and Aaron or Weer'd will make sure I see them. I'm also a contributor on the Blue Collar Prepping blog, which can be found at bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com. We're always looking for people interested in submitting posts to the blog, so please check out the site. Finally, I'm a published author, and books with my stories can be found on Amazon under the name Brena Bock, that's BRENABOCK. I'm also in anthologies published under my actual name. Look for David Bock on Amazon. Just not the guy who writes the computer books. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. I'm David, and this is Gun Lovers and Other Strangers.
It really is surprising how old those reflex sights are. I mean, I've always thought of them as relatively recent inventions.
Yeah, and to hear that they're over 100 years old, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, and furthermore, yeah, I was aware of that they were. I wasn't aware that they were that old, but I was aware that they were old technology. Just when I was looking up some stuff for some various things, and the Wikipedia page for reflex sights has images of a World War II fighter that has a reflex gun sight.
Yeah, I mean, when you think of heads-up displays, you don't think World War II. You know, you maybe think Vietnam. You know, heads-up displays feel like more of a 1980s technology.
Yeah, you think more Top Gun.
Yeah.
Either way, it was super interesting, and I look forward to the next one from David. Now it's the time in the show when Erin Paulette attends her fainting couch when she hears how much Oddball paid for a simple pocket knife.
Why? What? You didn't expect me to lay on the grass, did you?
I was not ready for that.
Welcome to Oddball's Corner Pocket. Regular listeners know that while I enjoy some Trash Panda guns, I'm also known for liking higher-end knives. I recently purchased a Sandrin Torino, which definitely qualifies. Unfortunately, it does sport a $300 price tag. Let's get into why I think it's worth it. Sandrin Knives is a small knife company out of Italy. If the name sounds familiar, it might be because I reviewed their first pocket knife, the TCK, way back in episode 61. And Weer'd has talked about their kitchen knives on several occasions. The company specializes in making knife blades using a polyhedral tungsten carbide. I went into detail on why that's special in my TCK review, but that was back in 2019. I'm guessing that most of you could use a refresher. Most folks are familiar with tungsten carbide and use with high-end drill bits and other tool heads. It's a material that is incredibly hard and works well in that use, but has been considered too brittle to make a knife blade out of. The founder of Sandrin, Alessandro Colombato, managed to create a version of tungsten carbide that can take the abuse that your average knife will see. I've seen this man actually flex the blade of a TCK with his hands. Not by much, but it was definitely there. And I've been told that there have been instances at Blade Show where he threw one of his knife blades against the concrete floor, and the blade was fine. All this while claiming a Rockwell hardness of 71, while even the best traditional blade steels will see maybe a HRC of around 62. Your average knife at Walmart is probably in the mid-50s. Oh, and of course, since the blade is made of a ceramic, you don't have to worry about it rusting. This is the first reason why this knife costs what it does. Standard tungsten carbide is not a cheap material to produce or work with. In this case, you're dealing with material that was literally invented for this purpose. And that can't be cheap. The handle for this particular model is made out of a carbon fiber. Oh, and I don't mean fiber scales on a steel frame, but rather 2 slabs of carbon fiber with only a metal spine and clip. Beyond requiring the usual holes drilled in the carbon fiber, the material has been milled in a few places. I'm not a materials engineer, but my understanding is that milling carbon fiber is not easy. Of course, Mr. Columbato's family business is making high-quality cutting tools, so I'm guessing that he has some expertise from that. Even the locking mechanism is unusual. It uses the recoil lock, which is an extremely new system designed by Tan Snecks. Tan has a few knives that he designed currently in production from Wee Knives, which are also in about the same price range. The Sandrin was one of the first knives that I've seen use this lock, and Sandrin is absolutely licensing this lock design from Tan. I'll get into how exactly this lock works in a minute. The pocket clip is milled titanium. This is a premium material and a premium way of manufacturing. Of course, at this price point, that's not exactly a rare thing. Finally, this knife is made in Italy. The Italians, with brands like Fox, Lion Steel, and MKM, are known for making high-quality knives. There is very much an artisan tradition in Italy, and you can be fairly secure in knowing that the manufacturer will pay attention to fit and finish. Unfortunately, that means a good bit of skilled human labor, which isn't cheap. So I think I've hit on the big reasons why this knife actually costs what it does. The big question is it worth it? The short answer for me is yes, it is. The blade, at roughly 2.5 inches of actual edge, is a little shorter than I usually like, but the edge is amazingly sharp. Add to the fact that the spine of the blade is only 1.3 millimeters thick, it's incredibly slicey. For reference, the spine of my Spyderco PM3 is 3.7 millimeters thick, and my classic Bock 110 is right at 3 millimeters. Oh, the official blade length is listed at 2.95 inches. The difference between the listed blade length and the actual sharpened edge is due to a finger choil at the base of the blade. This follows the industry standard of measuring from the tip of the blade to where the handle actually starts. This is something that's always bothered me, but like I said, it is the industry standard measurement, so what are you going to do? There is one thing that I'm not a fan of with the blade. They went with an odd choice for the blade's finish. They decided to go with what they call a raw carbide finish, which looks to me like it didn't get the finishing polish or has been scratched up with a good bit of use. This is in dramatic contrast to the TCK that I have with its mirror polish finish and the slip joints that they came out with in between the two models with a polished black finish. I know at least one knife geek that prefers this finish, but I'm just not sure how I feel about it. As I said earlier, the handle is carbon fiber and is nicely curved. There's a cutout to allow for the thumb stud, and it acts as a rather comfortable finger groove. Even though the handle's very thin, at just under 10 millimeters, it's very comfortable in the hand. For comparison, again, my Spyderco PM3, which is known for being thin, is 11.5 millimeters thick, and that Bock 110 that I have comes in at a beefy 15.3 millimeters. The pocket clip is an attractive deep carry clip that does a good job of keeping a tight grip on your pants material, but also being fairly easy to slip over the fabric and pull from your pocket. It's held on with a single Torx head screw and can easily be reversed for either left or right carry, but both are in the tip-up only position. As I said, the locking mechanism is fairly novel. The best way to quickly describe it is it's like what would happen if you took a Benchmade axis lock and put it on the spine instead of the sides of the handle. The spine is spring-loaded and can be pulled back either with a fingernail catching the front of the spine or the meat of your thumb running against some jimping near the front. Like with the axis lock, this allows for a strong lockup while still allowing the blade to swing freely when the lock is held back. This allows for the knife to be very friendly for folks that like to fidget with their knives, and of course is left-hander friendly. My favorite way of closing it is to have my index finger on the finger groove on the handle while I pull back on the lock with my thumb. The blade will drop and the finger choil will hit my finger. After that, I move the finger out of the way and just give it a little bit of a flick to finish closing it. For more on how the lock works, I highly suggest you check out Nick Shabazz's disassembly video, which will be in the show notes. So, at the end of the day, would I recommend you buy this knife? If you have the money and are looking for a nice dress knife, I would absolutely recommend it. Even if you want something to carry on a regular basis and are looking at venturing into that next tier of knives, this would still be a very solid choice. It slips into the pocket easily, will perform the tasks that your average pocket knife is asked to perform, and you won't have to worry about maintenance, including sharpening. Possibly ever. Of course, I can hear the folks saying that their $60 of EV will do what they want in a pocket knife to do, and frankly, Yeah, they're right. You don't have to pay $300 for a good pocket knife. This is the equivalent of a nicely appointed Smith & Wesson 1911, or a Brena 92 that Langdon Tactical has worked on, or maybe even a Staccato 2011. There's a wide range of pistols that will absolutely work for self-defense, target practice, or even competing in local IDPA matches that cost less than half of those guns. But the guns that I listed, they're just better, and you can easily tell. The same is true with this knife. It's a better cutting experience than most of my cheaper knives. It is a gentleman's folder that can still take abuse, and it definitely hits my geekiness button. While you can save $50 and get the same knife with some G10 scales instead of a carbon fiber, it just doesn't seem particularly special to me, and at that price point, I want special. Oh, and they have come out with another knife that is a bit closer to the size that I usually go for, and one of the options for the scales is zirconium. Yeah, I would love to have that knife, but it's $600. I'm not quite ready to shell that out for a knife quite yet. Hope this was informative. If you want to read more of my thoughts, I can be found at gunscarstech.com. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future segments, I can be reached at Oddball at gunscarstech.com or on the ACP Facebook page. Until next time, have a good one.
How you doing, Aaron?
Okay, honestly, I'm surprised that we found a knife that's too expensive for even Oddball to buy. I didn't think that was possible. And I asked him about the zirconium because I didn't see the appeal. I mean, I looked it up. Okay, so when I hear zirconium, I think cubic zirconium, the fake diamonds. And it's like, well, okay, that seems very flashy and blingy. And so if you've got a knife whose handle looks like diamond, that would certainly explain the price increase. Does it look like diamond? No, it's black. And it's just, what's the point of it? And Oddball's response was something like, well, it's neat. Because zirconium is hard to manufacture.
Yeah. Yeah, I wasn't quite as impressed with that either. Honestly speaking, the Sandrin utility and pocket knives aren't really my particular flavor. But I'm going to say I have a set of their kitchen knives, and I am madly in love. I believe I got them in 2019, and I've used them like almost exclusively in my cooking, and I spend a lot of time cooking. And so they have been used heavily, and I have not been nice to them. And they are all still reasonably sharp. They do need to be resharpened, and I will actually be contacting them probably sometime this week, because not only do they need to be sent back for sharpening, but I was actually cutting through a block of Parmesan cheese, and my knife went pop. I have the Santoku blade went pop, and then the blade came out. And we were talking about what's going on. It parted off from the handle, and there didn't appear to be. And I'm like, is there no tang on this knife? But there is. I did look down into the handle, and there is some metal down there. So
is it just a little rat tail tang?
And it's probably the rat tail tang might be just made with like a simple stainless steel, and they were brazed together, and either they weren't properly joined, or I don't know. But that's another thing for me to be contacting them and just seeing, all right, well, what do we do here? Because I don't think this knife is supposed to break this way. And so I'll let you guys all know. I'll probably do a whole segment on the sharpening and repair experience from Sandrin knives. But I'll say they are expensive. They're very, very expensive. But the fact that they don't really get dull, and you can really use them for years and years without ever having to sharpen them. Further, they just sit in the drying rack in my kitchen. They're just right there for me to grab, because I don't care if they're wet or get damp or get stuff splashed on them, because they don't rust and they don't corrode. So like there's nothing I can do. I can cut up lemons and limes with them. I can do all that stuff. And then also because the blades are so flexible and tough, you could do stuff like you can carve a chicken with them and not worry about with a traditional ceramic blade. You hit a bone, you can potentially chip the blade, and then not only did you damage your blade, but now there's an errant piece of ceramic in your food. So I'm absolutely in love with them, and I look forward to getting my knives as good as new again.
Yeah, how much did you pay for that?
I'm trying to remember. It was technically a Christmas present, so but I did buy them. I want to say I think I got 4 knives for $400 plus shipping, so they were roughly $100 a piece. Though of course, obviously, the paring knife is going to be cheaper than the 10-inch carving knife.
Okay, but still expensive enough for you to go, yeah, this shouldn't happen.
Yep. But also at the same time they're not. I've got some some Henkels and Wusthof knives in my knife block, and a lot of those are not too much cheaper than these. And my wife actually has some Shun knives, and those are actually more expensive than these, and they're just regular
Worcester knives.
Wusthof. Yeah, they're good. I actually highly recommend Wusthof or Henkels. Swing by your local like Bed Bath Beyond or other such home goods store, and just when they have a sale, grab some. You can usually get them. You can get some some of them are quite affordable, but the blades are very, very high quality.
I'm still giggling. It's really a shame that Wusthof knives aren't made in Worcester.
I mean, it's probably technically Wusthof because it's German. Either way.
Don't yuck my yum.
I'm not going to, Aaron. It would be Wusthof knives and Worcester. And of course, it'd be spelled Worcester sauce. Thanks to each and every one of our listeners, and a very special thanks to all our supporters on Patreon. To be on Patreon patron, go to patreon.com/Assorted podcast to sign up. Patrons get an early release of the podcast, plus bonus content like the hilarious blooper reels, the ACP film tracks, and the ACP mag dump.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends both online and off.
I have a blog. It's weerdworld.com. That's WEERD world.com. And hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
And you can get more from me at Linktree/Aaron Paulette. That's linktree.ee/Aaron Paulette, all one word.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
So I'm in Daytona, and he's not in Worcester. Our locations are assorted, and so's our podcast. It's lame, but this is the best I can do. Good night, everybody.
Welcome to Worcester, $1.25.